for the customer. So there's a strong focus on controlling costs, controlling expenses. And that's, I think, because of the value that Sam himself had and projected onto the environment. Now you also have some examples of an existing culture where a new CEO or a new leader comes in and they don't exactly match. I think a good example of that came about a year and a half ago, and it was with Jack Griffin, who was the very short-lived CEO of Time. You know, Time Incorporated, Time Magazine, biggest magazine publisher in the world. He had a great track record. Great track record. He was the CEO of Meredith. It was a similar industry. Good skills, good experience. One would expect that he would have been successful in Time, but it didn't work. He only lasted 6 months. Now, after the fact, they wrote articles about it to explain where the failure was. And what you can digest from those articles is that it was largely due to cultural fit. For example, it appeared that he was a bit too high tradition for that culture. Now, if you remember, I mentioned tradition earlier, and that's about old-fashioned family values, about strict morality in the way that we conduct business, a reverence for the things of the past. This guy would, in business meetings, talk about how his religion, how his spirituality was informing his business decisions. That may be okay in the right culture or the right organization. It did not fit with Time. It's not to say that they were atheists in Time, but that was not part of the norm for them. Also, it appears that Jack is a bit of what we call a high recognition leader. And a high recognition leader wants their name up in lights. They want to be known. They want that fame. They want the notoriety. In the long history of Time, I think they've been around for 100 years or more, nobody, no CEO had ever requested what Jack did. Jack requested or demanded that his name be in the masthead of all of the magazines that Time publishes. So on the magazine itself, he wanted his own recognition to say, I'm the boss of this organization. He wanted that recognition. That did not fly very well for the organization. And the last point is, I think kind of a no-brainer too, is there was resentment within the company that they had hired an external person to be the new CEO. You know, they wanted to grow from within. So when you're an outsider coming into an organization, it's going to be tough anyway. And especially you get brought in at a high leadership position to lead others who have already been there for years, who are already part of that culture. You have an uphill battle already. So his days were numbered, and I think it's clear after the fact why it didn't work out. I think you also see what happens when a leader can come in and change or make transformations for the culture. Steve Jobs, rest in peace. You know, for those, if you can get past the sparkles and glitter about the great things that he accomplished, people in the know that he was actually a very oppressive leader. He had he was a real challenge to work with, to the point where they had to create a buffer around him, surround him with people who were the mediators to keep him from blowing up on other people. But the guy was brilliant, and I think you see what happened. He was one of the founders of Apple. He was kicked out, and then when he came back is where they had their success. That's where all this real success has come from in the past decade or so, is when he was using his own values of what we call science, for sure. You know, so I already talked about science. He was a high science person, but also high aesthetics. So he cared a lot about the look and feel of things, the user experience. And that's why he wanted to simplify things. They created things, and they continue to create things that never existed. Really simple, clean, real beautiful lines. I'm not an Apple person myself, but I can appreciate the looks of the technology. And I would say that's because of him projecting his own values onto the organization. You can also see that there are some times where it's the same organization, And as a function of the leader, it can change the culture. I think Home Depot is a good example of that. Home Depot, when Robert Nardelli came in, he was focused mainly on metrics and profitability. And he made some key strategic errors in not paying attention to the customer and trying to pay more attention to contractors and really to govern more based on the numbers. And that had an impact on the culture of Home Depot and their success. But now you get Frank Blake in there, and he cares differently. He cares more about empowerment, and he cares more about customer satisfaction. Those are his own values, and he projects those onto the culture, and now you see Home Depot making a comeback. So they have Home Depots here in Monterrey, right?
Yes.
So, yeah, how long has Home Depot been in Monterrey? Like 10 years. So I wonder, I'm just curious, was it the case that, say, about a few years ago, whenever you would go into a Home Depot, did you feel like the customer service was going down? Was not as good?
Yes.
Yeah? Because we certainly experienced it in the U.S. And that was when Robert Nardelli was the leader. Now, have you felt, if you go to Home Depot recently, have you felt that it's coming back? A little bit? Okay. It's good. It takes a while to change the culture. So even though if you get a new boss, it takes a while to filter down. And then especially with international business, international locations, it can take even longer to make that cultural transition. But I think that Home Depot, and you can see it in the stock price, has been coming back as a function of a new leader with different values. Okay. I think one of the other things to know is that, especially the values for leaders, is that one of the best predictors of long-term behavior is values. Now, I know I said not that long ago that values don't exactly equal behavior, but when you are left to your own devices, when you have latitude and autonomy to behave or do whatever you want, because of cognitive dissonance, you are going to be motivated to behave in a way that is more fulfilling of your own values. Therefore, in the long run, you are going to behave in a way that is more in alignment with values. Since leaders tend to have more discretion and more autonomy, therefore they tend to behave in ways that is more fulfilling of their values.